There's a moment on death row when everything finally becomes real. For Harold Wayne Nichols, that moment came when he was asked one simple question. How do you want to die? Electric chair or lethal injection? But Nichols refused to answer. He just sat there, silent. And that silence decided everything. Under Tennessee law, that meant the clock officially started ticking toward his death, and the state chose his fate for him. On December 11th, at precisely 7 p.m., they plan to execute him. And this time, the state doesn't plan to back out. But before we get there, there's something you need to understand. This case isn't just about crime, or justice, or punishment. It's about a system that nearly collapsed before our eyes, and a single inmate whose death might be used to prove that everything is back in order. Almost like he's not just being punished, he's being used to make a point. Summer of 1988, Chattanooga, Tennessee. A young student named Karen Pulley, just 21 years old, leaves home like any ordinary day. She never makes it back. She was studying at Chattanooga State University. Quiet, focused, kind. She wasn't famous or controversial or wealthy. She was just living her life. But someone else was watching. Someone she never saw coming. That someone was Harold Wayne Nichols. And that night, he violently took her life. Nichols didn't just attack Karen, he brutally assaulted her in a way prosecutors would later describe as methodical and predatory. And when they finally caught him, Nichols confessed not only to her murder, but to several other rapes around Chattanooga. This wasn't a one-time strike. This was a pattern. At trial, he expressed remorse, but also said something that chilled everyone in the courtroom. If I hadn't been caught, I wouldn't have stopped. In that moment, the courtroom went still. Dead still. People understood something fundamental. This man wasn't just dangerous. He was predictably dangerous. And in 1990, a Tennessee jury decided that only one sentence fit the crimes: death. The death penalty was supposed to bring closure. But in America, death row often means years or even decades of waiting. Nichols has been on death row for over 30 years. 3 entire generations have grown up since his conviction. But then, something unexpected happened. In 2020, Tennessee finally scheduled his execution date. The state asked him which method he preferred. And this time, Nichols did choose. He selected the electric chair. Why? Maybe it was control. Maybe it was fear of a drug gone wrong. Maybe it was his final act of defiance. But before the execution could happen, the world changed. COVID-19 shut everything down. Courts froze. Executions were postponed nationwide. For Nichols, it was the closest he'd come to death. Then suddenly, life continued. That's when things started spiraling inside Tennessee's justice system. In 2022, long after the pandemic, Tennessee's governor did something that rocked the entire state. He halted all executions. And not because of mercy, not because of new evidence, not because of last-minute appeals. No, it was because the state discovered something alarming behind closed doors. The drugs used for every lethal injection since 2018 had never been properly tested. Not once. Not for purity, not for contamination, not even for concentration. Think about that. An execution isn't supposed to be torture. It's supposed to be quick. But without correct drug testing, nobody truly knew what was happening inside the veins of the condemned. That means every inmate executed under that protocol for nearly 7 years might not have died cleanly. Their bodies were buried, but questions remained. And the state could say nothing for sure. A quiet panic spread through Tennessee law offices. Defense attorneys demanded investigations. Journalists started digging. Politicians grew nervous. Suddenly, people started wondering, had Tennessee been violating human rights under the guise of justice? The governor ordered a full investigation. For 3 years, Execution dates were completely frozen. Behind the scenes, the state was rewriting death itself. Finally, in late 2024, Tennessee released its new execution protocol. One drug, just one, pentobarbital. Years ago, this same drug was used in medical euthanasia, but in death penalty cases, it's been debated fiercely. Some argue it works cleanly, others say it's unreliable, even painful. Several death row inmates immediately sued, claiming the new protocol could still result in slow, torturous deaths. A trial is now scheduled for April next year. But Nichols won't live that long, which raises a strange and uncomfortable question. If the protocol is still under legal fire, why is Nichols being executed now? Why him? First. Some critics say Nichols is being used as a test run, the first to die under the fixed system, the one that proves everything is safe again. But what if it isn't?
Now fast forward to November of this year. Nichols is called in once again. He's asked the same question as before: electric chair or lethal injection? This time, he says nothing. He didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He didn't beg. He just declined to choose and walked out. Under Tennessee law, if an inmate convicted before 1999 refuses to select a method, the state simply chooses for them: lethal injection. But this time, there is no COVID delay. There is no protocol pause. There is no investigation holding things back. The data set, the clock is running, and Harold Wayne Nichols is scheduled to die. But right when everything appeared settled, something unexpected surfaced. A petition, a plea, a request coming not from Nichols himself, but from people who knew him inside prison: correction officers, counselors, inmates he once mentored, even chaplains. They wrote letters claiming Nichols changed behind bars. They described a calmer, quieter man who helped keep peace in high-tension situations. A man who taught Bible study. A man who listened. A man who tried, in a place designed to crush people, to do the opposite. It wasn't a push for innocence. Nobody said he didn't do it. But they asked one thing: does he still deserve death? A clemency request was filed, asking the governor to commute his sentence to life. And here's the detail the petition focused on like a laser. Since 1978, when the death penalty was reinstated, no man who pleaded guilty has ever been executed in Tennessee. If Nichols goes through with this sentence, he'll be the first. And suddenly, this case isn't just about Harold Wayne Nichols anymore. It's about history, ethics, politics, and what happens when punishment becomes an example. To understand why this case still divides people, you have to step into the psychology of offenders like Nichols. Experts say there's a difference between rage and pattern, between impulse and calculation. What set Nichols apart wasn't a moment of red-hot fury. It was the cold repeatability of his behavior. He didn't stalk at random. He hunted. Multiple victims, all in the same region. And during his trial, he admitted it wasn't going to stop. Many viewed him as the kind of predator society simply couldn't risk leaving alive. Not just dangerous, but addicted to violence. Psychologists who studied similar offenders often described them as possessing a kind of behavioral gravity. Once they start, they pull more people in, and the damage grows. But here's the question that now hangs over his execution. Can someone like that ever change? And if he did change, does it matter? That uncertainty, that unknown, is why Tennessee is suddenly so divided. Harold Nichols has spent over 30 years living in a space smaller than most people's bathrooms. A concrete box, a metal bed, lights that never fully go dark, and a clock that moves slower than time itself. Some say that's worse than death. Others think it's justice. Over time, inmates start to lose track of their memories. The meals blur together. The seasons feel identical. Faces fade and names go blank. But Nichols developed a routine. He worked in the chapel area. He helped mediate tensions between inmates. He even attempted to counsel others who followed the same dark patterns he once did. It didn't erase his past. It didn't restore his victims. But it did raise the question, is death row meant to remove a danger from society or erase a chapter of humanity altogether? Because inside Tennessee's hardest prison, Nichols wasn't seen as a threat anymore. He was seen as a man capable of calming other threats. For some, that made execution feel necessary. For others, that made it feel irreversible. And that's where the emotional divide began. In every story like this, there is one voice people rarely hear: the family of the victim. Karen Pulley wasn't just a name on a court docket. She was a daughter, a friend, a student with plans, ideas, and a future she never got to finish. For her family, justice took 30 years to arrive. 3 decades of waiting, appeals, delays, 3 decades of looking at dates only to have them erased. Her family at one point said something brutally honest. We don't want revenge, we want closure. But closure isn't always easy to define. Does it come from death, from forgiveness, from silence? Or does it never come at all? Her family has stayed mostly private, but one thing remains certain. Their pain never froze when the courts did. The legal system might slow down, but grief doesn't care about court schedules. And that's why Tennessee, no matter what happens, will leave someone unsatisfied.
This execution doesn't simply ask, was Harold Nichols guilty? That part is undeniable. Instead, it asks something far more difficult. What is justice supposed to feel like? Some argue this execution is long overdue, that Nichols took a life and now must surrender his own. Others argue that death row turned into something he never expected, a place of reflection, that the man Tennessee is about to kill isn't the same man who committed those crimes. But then comes the biggest debate of all. Do serial predators deserve reflection? Or is that luxury something they forfeited the moment they robbed someone else of their future? That's the razor-thin line America still walks today. Not just the law, but the conscience behind it. And on December 11th, the state will choose its answer, whether it's true justice or just closure dressed as consequence. If the execution proceeds, Harold Nichols will take one final walk down a hallway known among prison staff as the longest 30 steps in Tennessee. There will be no family waiting for him at the end, no friends, no celebrations, just a team of officers, a gurney, a needle holding pentobarbital, and a room designed to shut the world out. Witnesses, if approved, will enter quietly. They're told not to speak, not to react, not to make eye contact. A physician will stand in the corner. A warden will give a signal. And Harold Nichols, a man who once chose the electric chair but now declines any choice at all, will only have one final moment left. Sometimes inmates speak, sometimes they don't. What he says or doesn't say may be his final defiance or his last apology. Either way, it will be the end. The truth is simple. This execution is more than a sentence. It's a statement, a test, a return to routine after 3 years of uncertainty. Some believe Tennessee needs to reassert authority. Others believe rushing this execution, while protocol lawsuits are still ongoing, may create more questions than answers. Even now, legal teams are trying to halt it. Clemency requests are pending. Appeals could drop at any moment. But the state isn't hesitating. They've paused long enough. They're moving forward. Which leaves the rest of us wondering, are we watching justice? Or a system trying to prove it still works? Whether Nichols dies on that date or not, Tennessee has already crossed the line. Executions are resuming. New protocols are in place. And the debate surrounding justice will only grow louder. Some will say he got what he deserved. Others will say death came too late. And a small few will quietly wonder, did this execution change anything at all? Or did it simply close a file? Karen Pulley's name will remain in the archive. Her family will keep living without her. And Tennessee will continue writing new dates on its execution calendar. But Harold Wayne Nichols, for all the horror he caused, has already become something more than a prisoner. He is now a question, a test, a reflection of how far the justice system is willing to go to prove it still has control. And when that needle goes in, America will watch, not to see how he dies, but to wonder what this country becomes the moment he does.